Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Rob Shumay, and I am happy to say that Coach Warinner is joining us today, back from a couple-week hiatus over in the European Football League. And, it's very appropriate. A couple Ohio boys, got another Ohio boy on here. Mark Bona, how are you?
I am great. How's it going, guys?
Doing
Fantastic.
Doing fantastic. Listen, I know we have a lot to chat about with the amazing book, which I just finished over the weekend that you put out. But look, there's some really pressing issues with Cleveland sports right now that I got to ask you. You know, you're a longtime sports reporter, editor for the Plain Dealer, writer for Cleveland.com. I mean, the list goes on, but I got to ask you, what is going on in the quarterback room out in Berea?
Your guess is as good as mine. Just to let you know, I'm kind of a jack of all trades. I'm a features writer, but I get to dabble in a lot of sports coverage, sports entertainment, and sports history. So I don't get to too many Browns games, although I religiously watch them week in and week out because I'm, I guess, a glutton for punishment on that. You could this is a big lottery question as to who's going to come out of this room, who's not going to be there in a couple months. It's going to be absolutely fascinating.
Well,
yeah,
go ahead, Ed.
I'm coaching the quarterbacks over here, and I have three quarterbacks, and there's not enough practice for three quarterbacks in a professional football team practice. So I don't know how they have five quarterbacks on their roster, how that's going to work.
Well, and the news right now, Deshaun Watson is apparently throwing. Now, it's probably a little bit of soft toss, but what are you hearing about Deshaun and that whole situation?
I think he's got one foot out the door, whether it's his doing or the team's. I wouldn't hold my breath. That guy has been really banged up. You know, when he was with Houston, he was obviously a completely different quarterback. And I don't know how he comes out of this one. I really don't. He's had to overcome quite a bit physically.
So from the Browns standpoint, if he doesn't play, they stand to at least get some money back on the insurance, right?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Is there a possibility that there's some animosity there? Animosity there between the team and maybe what Deshaun's doing in terms of throwing right now?
That's a good question, Rob. I really don't know. It's a tough one for me to answer. I'm really not sure.
Yeah. What's your take in terms of who stays, who's going to go?
I'm really interested in the whole Sanders bit because on one hand, you've got a guy who was so highly touted, who's got a resume with a lot of awards on it. And on the other, you've got a guy and let's, for whatever reason, I mean, we could talk an hour for the reasons, but for whatever reason, landed in the 5th round. And that, I don't know. I mean, he's a guy I really want to see how he comes out of this. I'd love to see him at least in preseason and see what happens.
Coach, what was your take on the Browns taking Sanders?
It was interesting because they had already taken Dylan and Gabriel, and then they ended up taking, Shador, and it was interesting. That's just so not typical with that full of a room with Joe Flacco sitting there, Kenny Pickett, who started for us a couple years back, sitting there, and then take another guy in that position was interesting what they're thinking. So I'm not really sure. I'm as caught off guard by the thing as anybody, and I love the Browns, but I don't know. That's a full room with a lot of egos and a lot of footballs.
Mark, Nick Chubb has been kind of the heart and soul of this team. The past few years, now they went and picked up a couple running backs. Is the writing on the wall for Chubb?
I would guess it is at this point. You know, at one point, if I recall last season, and I'm trying to remember my dates and things are a little fuzzy, but he was targeted, I think, to come back, and then it was extended. And I just think he's another one who's had a very long road physically. I think it's a tough one to come back. He had already had knee, I want to say he had knee surgery back when he was at the University of Georgia. Coach, you may remember. But so he's had some issues. And it's a shame. He's a beloved guy. The fans absolutely love him. They've embraced him. He was an electrifying runner, not by being fancy and not by his jukes, but just by his overall power. And he was just a kind of an old school running back. And I hope things work out for him. I'm not sure they're going to at this point.
Yeah, from a salary cap issue, Watson, I've seen various numbers. I don't know, could be $100 million of dead cap space next year. Does Chubb become a casualty of that limited cap space?
A distinct possibility. I don't doubt that for a second.
What else are you hearing in terms of the Browns? What should we be paying attention for as we get inch closer to training camp in about 6 or 7 weeks?
Probably just looking at the injury list and who stays off of it. And it's tough for me to say. I mean, we have 3 beat writers who are on it, and they're just getting into it now. And I'm not really as privy to that as they are. But I would say it's a blank canvas for the Browns at this point.
What do you think of the stadium situation? Is that going to change? Are they moving out to Brooklyn?
It appears they are. This has been a classic political football, to use an analogy, or really almost like a boxing match, a slugfest, where both sides are suing each other. Both sides are pretty ticked off at each other. And I'm not sure where it's going to land. I was optimistic for a long time that in the 11th hour, something's going to happen to keep the Browns in Cleveland. But the problem is more than just a political football about a football stadium. It involves lakefront development. No one can agree on this. This has been a discussion for 25, 30 years in the city of Cleveland. It's not ending now. Now it's just exacerbating and getting worse. My newsroom happens to be 6 miles from the airport, which is very, very close to where the Brown Stadium site is. So already we're saying, whatever you do, if this thing gets built, don't fly in or out of Cleveland on a Sunday afternoon. It's going to be an absolute nightmare. I covered a very large sports convention about a year ago, the National. It's a great convention. It was there for, I think, 5 days. I've covered 3 of them in Cleveland. It took me an hour and a half to go 6 miles. That's for a sports convention at a convention center. Can you imagine a Browns game in an airport traffic? I mean, it's going to be crazy. These sides still have a few rounds to go in the boxing match. It's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out.
Now, along that, it's my understanding that the land is already purchased out there, and from that standpoint, like no pun intended, but the groundwork is laid.
I believe so. The Haslams are moving forward with their plan. The county executive is on the other side of this, and then of course state money is involved. So state legislators are also involved, and the whole thing reminds me of something that I actually have in my book, where about 50 years ago, a very similar thing played out. It's all a game of chicken with a lot of these guys. And Art Modell was really going at it with the city for improvements on the old Cleveland Municipal Stadium. And he actually went so far as to purchasing, I think it was 170 acres in Strongsville. And I get into a little bit of that in my book. That never worked out. And I think he ended up dumping the land for a profit, and they stayed in Cleveland. But I'm still, for whatever reason, whether it's knowing that history, whether it's seeing this play out across the country other times, I really think it's a game of chicken, and that eventually it gets worked out. It's kind of hard to imagine this downtown Cleveland without a football stadium. And maybe I'm just naive and old school on that, but I really think that they'll get it worked out.
Well, I think you mentioned one of the driving factors is the lakefront development. And, I remember when I was at one of the largest employers there. Our CEO was on the board of Tomorrow, I think it was called, for the city of Cleveland when they were making that decision. And I tried everything to urge him not to select that place. It's difficult to get in and out of, like you had said, but why not develop it like Baltimore or, something like that versus having a building that's empty except for, 10 or 11 days out of the year.
That's a very prescient point on your part. And now we're seeing a lot of owners of whether it's a city or private ownership of minor league baseball stadiums, baseball parks, and especially football are talking about having it open for other things. Football is really, like you said, it's really only available for half a dozen dates a year when you cut the season in half for home and road. I interviewed Don Pasquale, the former mayor of Akron, a couple of years ago for an anniversary story about Canal Park. That's the minor league baseball stadium in the heart of downtown Akron. It was a big deal. He was really proud of it. He's a former college football player, and he said, I know that a stadium, especially football, is a bad investment because you just can't use it enough. You've got to have other things to do, coupled with the fact, like you alluded to, it's hard to get in and out. It isn't like Detroit. It isn't like Baltimore. It's not like other riverfront type of places. That's a problem. You've got to have other things going on. Baseball has done a better job than football when it comes to multi-use purposes for their stadiums.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And what do you think the timeline is for this decision?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it was funny. I really don't know, but I was just thinking about it the other day because I was writing a story unrelated to sports about something that's going on at Burke Lakefront Airport. That's another big political football because it's only used for small jets, but it's on arguably the most exclusive piece of property in downtown Cleveland. And a lot of people say, only rich people are using this to get in and out of. That's a really, really key factor. And for those people listening who may not know this, part of the problem and the challenge here in terms of redeveloping the lakefront for a football stadium or really anything else is that it's going to involve basically physically moving the interstate. For those who don't know, Interstate 90 in downtown Cleveland actually takes a 90-degree turn. It's famous. It's known as Dead Man's Curve, and the miles per hour limit at this point is right now and has been is 35 miles an hour on an interstate that takes a turn like that. They're going to have to redo all of that. The Browns have paid. They paid a while back for a plan to see what could be done. Everybody keeps weighing in on this. So to answer your question, the time frame is just really difficult to say, but because these discussions have been going on for just years and years.
And then there's probably the question: how much money does the city have? It's not the best economic times for cities right now.
No, not at all. I mean, anytime you see when a stadium development or a build out is being discussed, you're almost at the point now where it's just pro forma. You're going to have some sort of a public-private agreement. I think most people can agree on that. But the weird thing about this is these sides are just they're not close. It's like a divorce, and you're trying to figure out the money that's left. At some point, they have to get closer. But you're right. A city only has so much money. The state has technically less money because you have more people reaching out and asking, hey, we need a project for this, that, and the other thing. It's not just sports. It's a lot of other things as well. So I really don't know what the time frame is. I'm not very optimistic about that. And I think, and you may know this, Rob, I think there's still a rule on the books with the NFL that says if you don't have a covered stadium, that if you're north of the Mason-Dixon line, if you're in the north as an NFL city, you cannot host the Super Bowl. I believe that's still a rule, and we haven't had one in an open-air stadium in the north. And the only ones we've had in the north have been domes, like Minneapolis and a few other places.
Detroit, yep. Do you think the Browns host a Super Bowl before they play in one?
Yes. Yeah, I absolutely. If they get a dome, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I hate to say it, but it's been a long road. I've been religious. I moved here in 2000. I've been religious about watching the Browns and occasionally write about them or other initiatives that they do. And it's part of it is a series of bad luck and key injuries over the years. I feel bad for some of the guys who never got to playoffs or made a serious run. I co-authored a book on Joe Thomas a few years ago, and I think he's a stand-up guy, and people absolutely, this city loved him from the time of the draft. They embraced him. He was, he just took a blue-collar work ethic, and you want to pull for somebody like that. And the city dies hard with its teams.
Yep.
Hey, Joe Thomas, he coached the offensive line for Munich over here last year.
That's right. That's right. He's a big world traveler. He really likes to open his mind, to explore, and so it didn't surprise me that he took that gig.
How'd he do over there, Ed?
Well, he's a phenomenal guy. I actually have a drill that I learned from him, spending time with Browns at some practices. I call it the Joe Thomas. I use it all the time with my guys, but I'm sure he did great. I'm sure and learned a lot. I don't know what their record was or any of that, but I just know from the players and the scuttlebutt over here in Europe, they enjoyed having him in Munich last year.
Yeah, it sounds like, Mark, according to your knowledge of Joe, that it sounds like that's something right up his alley in terms of traveling.
Yeah, he loves to travel, and he's also a guy with a lot of different business type of involvement right now in his career. He's done well. He's been careful with his money, good family guy, and it's going to be interesting to see what he settles into. I liked his analysis. I saw him do several preseason games, and he's a good guy. I don't know if he wants to travel right now because his kids are young. He more or less said that a while back. I'd love to see what he does. I think he'd be a very, very good coach because he has the patience to deal with guys. You look at a guy, it's not just being great at your job. I mean, Coach, you probably can answer this better than me, but you look at a guy like Michael Jordan, and there was always the bit about when he took over in Washington, it was kind of like, okay, you go here, you go there, you cut there, score. And he didn't realize that not everybody on that court, maybe no one, has the ability of Michael Jordan. I think Thomas would have the patience to deal with guys who aren't as technically proficient at his position, at their position, as he was with his.
Yeah, I really think that that's something that he was intrigued about National Football League. So I think he tried the European football, professional football over here just to see if it was up his alley, if he enjoyed it, if he connected with the players. And only he knows how he feels about that. But I'm sure that was part of his experiment, and then it's on his resume if somebody wants to give him a shot. So he's a phenomenal player and knows the game so well and communicates well. So I can't imagine it didn't go well for him.
Yeah. Well, Coach, segue, I guess, into basketball since you brought up Jordan and whatnot. The Cavs have a lot of work to do this offseason, don't they? I mean, they're up against the second apron, I think it's called, in the salary cap.
Yeah, they do have a lot of work to do. I mean, and I don't know, and maybe that's not fair. Maybe not a lot, but they have some work to do. I think the critical piece there is that they really need toughness inside. I love Jared Allen. I went to a good handful of games this year. Luckily, I'm married to a woman who enjoys basketball, and we have partial season tickets, and we watch a lot of the games. And it was fun seeing this team evolve. Kenny Atkinson did, I thought, a phenomenal job with them, but they need a physical presence that is going to carry them more into the playoffs and through the playoffs than the regular season.
So do you anticipate getting that from somebody on the roster, or is that going to come, through a trade? Or
it's a good question. I don't think it's coming from the roster. I mean, I don't think I can't think of anyone who's going to all of a sudden toughen up their game. I mean, you don't have too many Dennis Rodmans anymore where he turned his game around based on rebounding and based on defense. Maybe they do. I don't know. Jared Allen seems like a wonderful man who's very good at what he does, but I think there's a physical presence that's required now, even with the positions kind of being more fluid in the NBA these days. I think it'll come somehow from a trade. If they find someone, and maybe that involves giving up a second rounder at some point. I don't know. It's going to be a good question.
What about, this is the second year in a row we went into the playoffs and lost 3 players to injury. Second year in a row. Is there something, any whispers or anything about the conditioning of the team, or do you think that's just a fluke?
I think it's fluke and individual. I have this discussion on other levels with my editor about I cover a variety of different topics, and if 5 places close down in Cleveland, he sometimes says, "Hey, I think we should do a trend story. What's going on?" I said, if they close down because of the same reason, that's a trend story. But if 5 places close down for 5 different reasons, that's just fluke, individual, whatever you want to call it. I don't think that the injuries are related. They're different players at different positions. So I haven't heard anything about that. So I don't think that's really an issue.
And they're not older players either. So it's not like you're, veteran need to watch throughout the season and count their minutes and be real selective with them. I don't think that's it.
No, and even Cleveland this year did a fantastic job of managing the workload, right? They had a lot of games where they rested players. They, I think they controlled the management load. I don't know what else we can do. What do you think, Mark?
I think you hit the nail on the head. They did. I give Atkinson a lot of credit on a couple things. That's one of them. And he really did manage it well. And he knew, everybody knew where this team was going, or we thought, we knew it was it's going to be maybe not top seed, but maybe a 2 seed going into the playoffs. He made sure these guys were rested. He did everything he could. And I think people really, really like that. He never really, burned these guys out. I think I was reading from some of our writers that the practices were becoming extraordinarily nominal. They were just basically down to walkthroughs toward late in the season. So he did a good job with that. And it's just a tough call. And it seems to me, having watched those games, I really think Darius Garland's injury, I think he gutted it out in a tough way. I think they all did, but I really think Garland was really affected by the injury, and you could see it. He was just trying really hard.
So, Jerome, I don't think there's room to keep them. They're over the cap. I don't know how much money Gilbert's gonna contribute. I don't even know if they can sign him. Are you how astute are you on the cap situation right now?
Not very, but that's an interesting point. Maybe he's one of the expendable players at this point to open up more money. It's maybe somebody out there has a big who can trade a guy but needs a shooter and maybe a draft choice. I don't know. It depends who the big is. I keep thinking this team. How would this team have been if Draymond Green were a healthy Draymond Green were on it? And that's a weird question, I know, because I know he'd be on the bench half the time with technicals. But I wonder if that type of physical presence would have helped a little bit with the Cavs in the playoffs.
Let me ask you, going back to another Cavs team that people may have said the same thing about were the Brad Daugherty Cavs. Do you see a similarity there with Daugherty not being as physical and I don't know, do you see a similarity there, or am I way off base?
No, I don't think you're off base. That's not. I hadn't heard that, but that's not a bad analogy. You had it. They had a team with both inside and outside games. Of course, the game was different then, and I think the positions were very different then. They were way more defined than they are now in the league. Not a bad analogy. They did what they could do, but they didn't. Again, though, they didn't win a title in those days either, though.
Yeah, big knock. Big knock was Daugherty not being, a physical enough presence, right? Because who were you going up against back then? You had, the Malones, you had Horace Grant with the Bulls. You
had Boston, you had Chicago, you had Detroit, you had those guys. That's right.
Yeah, it's interesting. So the Indians, Guardians, excuse me. Every time I turn the game on to watch, I see so many empty seats. Why, in your opinion, is that, Mark?
I honestly think it's honestly, I'll take the old excuse on this and say it's the weather. April weather in Cleveland is at best it's a crapshoot. Even May to a degree. May has been up and down. We've had days where I've been in shorts and a t-shirt. We've had days when I had a hoodie and sweats on. I think I even had a winter coat on a couple of days earlier this month. People don't enjoy it. I mean, Clevelanders are hardy folks, but few people want to sit outside for a solid 3 hours in a stadium where you're getting some wind gust inside, unless the team is on this unbelievable run, and no team is on an unbelievable run at the beginning of the season. I think things will pick up. They've done a lot with that stadium. They've had a lot of different, from food to seats to everything else. It's I think it's the second smallest stadium in the league right now. I'm not positive about that, but it's not a bad seat in the house. You can't see the entire field from any seat, but it's not a bad seat in the house. I think people will come back. I think they'll pick up here as soon as the weather warms up.
Emmanuel Clase, fixable or not?
Man, this went from 60 to 0 overnight, and that overnight, unfortunately, came in the postseason last year. I don't know. I mean, I try to read about pitching and pitchers, and I had to read a little bit about one of the chapters on my book is about the creation of the slider, and I had to really get into the mechanics of that and learn all that. I don't know. I haven't, not being a baseball coach or a manager, I don't know what happened with this guy because it wasn't a gradual thing. If it's gradual, then you say, okay, something's off here. He's tweaked, he's changed things. Kluber a few years ago had tweaked his back. Nobody knew. That altered his pitching a little bit. You can figure that out over time. This was like somebody turned a light out. I don't know. I mean, could you say that does an arm only have X number of 100-mile-per-hour pitches in it? I don't know. I mean, it's quite a juggernaut, I think, for the Guardians, and quite a bit of frustration for their fans.
Well, Coach, this goes as much to you as it does to Mark here. Last year, Mark mentioned, the blow up that Clase had in the postseason. Following the season, Clase's social media was all pictures of what he had done in the past, going back years. Like, I was a dominant pitcher here, I was a dominant pitcher there. How much, Coach and Mark, do you think it could be mental as opposed to physical?
Hard to say. I mean, I'm sure he's posting that because the fans, he's getting a lot of negative, social media. And they remember, I did a lot of things for this franchise. I've been a great player here. Don't beat me up for one bad or whatever. So I just think, probably trying to soften the blow of fan abuse.
Yeah, I think you're right, Coach. Yeah, I think you're right, but I also do think it's a valid point that it could be mental, and he's maybe using the photos. I wasn't aware of that, but maybe he's using his social platforms to keep more of a positive face on it. It definitely could be mental, but I think coaches. One thing I've learned talking to coaches and reading about them is that coaches want to see gradual improvement. They're patient people internally, and they just want to see things going up on a regular basis. What they don't want are roller coasters, because then you never know what you're going to get, and it's kind of tough to control. I mean, Coach, you could weigh in on that if you want, but I definitely think there could be something mental going on. Who knows? Maybe it's the equivalent of the yips. I mean, who was it? Was it Knobloch who all of a sudden couldn't find first base in the infield? Golfers have it all the time. Maybe it is a thing with closers. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the mental part people don't appreciate much. I mean, it's just so difficult to do what they do at the level they do it at consistently against the best players in the world at this sport. And, you can have sometimes, and then you start doubting yourself. And I don't care who you are. You can have a bad outing. You have a bad couple outings, and the next thing you know, you question yourself and it's in your own head. Like you said, there's lots of golfers. I mean, how long was it between wins for Rory McIlroy? You know what I mean? How long between wins was it for him? I mean, he last year was at the U.S. Open and let that slip away, and then battled back to finally win this year the major. But it's the best players have trouble sometimes mentally, and that's why a lot of them have a psychologist, their own coach to help them through that.
And maybe I'm reading a little too much into it or trying to find something that's not there, but was he trying to find his own solid ground to convince himself that he wasn't as bad as he had performed during that New York series?
Could
Absolutely.
be. Don't know.
Anyway, Jose Ramirez, most underrated player in Major League Baseball.
So consistent. I mean, this guy, it's, not just hitting for average, not being able to hit for power. People often forget, people outside of Cleveland, I don't think realize the guy's got smart speed on the base paths. And he's a solid glove. Yeah, I mean, he's just done a tremendous job. I mean, consistency is the name of the game for any athlete, and he's been so consistent at a great level.
Where do you see the Indians ending up this year?
Tough question, because I think I cannot figure out the AL Central at this point. I mean, we're a month and change into the season, and a lot of picks I think are upside down. I think Detroit had a little spin off there. Minnesota really turned it on. It's tough to say. But as the famous cliched saying goes, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I'm going to be optimistic. Again, I think this one will go down. I mean, we've seen some injuries with on the team, but if they can and this is a horrible cliche, but if they can stay healthy, I think they have as good a shot as anyone else. Having the wild card spaces obviously helps a team like Cleveland that's not coming out of the gate incredibly in a dominant way, so they can play for just making the postseason.
Well, you mentioned that you were a feature writer. Other than Coach, who would you do a feature story on next? Who are some of your primary targets here?
Oh my gosh, that is, I wouldn't know where to begin with that question. I really love finding things out about an athlete that people don't know, and often they really want to open up and talk about that. Now, one quick example is an interview I didn't get. I'm still trying to get. I love going back and finding older ball players to see what they've done, and from one little moment or multiple moments on the diamond or field, and then talking to them about that, but then also talking to them about what they're doing now. Lou Merlone I think he played 4 years in the majors. He was with Cleveland. He had a big opening day game once in the early 70s. I dug him up for a story on that game, and it turns out he's an engineer in New Mexico at a lab where he specializes in making better spark plugs for cars. I was just blown away by something like that. I wanted to reach out this week. I did a story I called it Happy George Steinbrenner Day. Monday, May 19th, was the anniversary in 1973 of Steinbrenner coming back to Cleveland for the first time as Yankees owner. Now, he was already apoplectic because the team had started off poorly. They didn't have a good year anyway. They ended up playing well against the Indians, but the Indians beat them that day. Milt Wilcox got the win, and Ray Lamb got the save. Ray Lamb, in his later life, became an artist. He made those little tiny pewter statues that were really big for Dungeons and Dragons people back in the day. And I was really trying to get a hold of Ray. I'd love to talk to him about that. So I get more of a kick out of finding guys like that rather than a complete superstar. Although I will say this, one interview I'd like to do about race and sports on a sociological and serious level would be with Donovan Mitchell. I think he's a pretty cerebral guy. I think he's very smart. I think his court sense is also really, really sharp. So he'd be another one if I had to throw out a few names for you.
Well, you wrote a book called The Hidden History of Cleveland Sports. Mark, what was the motivation for putting this book together?
Well, it was interesting because an editor with the publisher called me and he said, Mark, I've been reading your stuff. I think you'd be good for this type of a story. We're pretty open on the parameters. And I said, I only had one requirement. I said, I absolutely will not write about or talk about the fumble, the drive, any of those, the shot, any of the infamous moments in Cleveland sports history, because I think they've been done ad nauseum. I want to find things under the radar. So when I'm doing research and all of a sudden I'll stop and say, I didn't know that, I think maybe readers would have the same reaction. So that was the motivating factor for each and every one of the chapters that I wrote about.
Coach, in Cleveland sports history, aside from the fumble and the drive that Mark mentioned, what would be one of your Cleveland sports stories, other than you throwing the first pitch out?
And it was a strike when I threw it out. Yeah, in the stadium for both the drive and the fumble. Anyway, I have that scar. What was the year that there were 3 members of the Indians that were killed tragically? 2 in a boat accident.
93.
I remember that clearly. Was shocking and devastating to the franchise and to the fan base.
Yeah, and Mark, you wrote about that in your book.
Yeah, fascinating tale there, because I didn't start out writing about Cruz and Olin, the 2 pitchers who were killed. Bobby Ojeda was injured, and then he recovered and came back. But what really got me was what everybody forgets. That happened in March of 93. In December of 93, another player on the Indians who was another pitcher also died. A young pitcher named Cliff Young was driving, had an accident, a fatal accident outside of his hometown in Texas, outside of Houston. And what's amazing is that you had this young manager, Mike Hargrove, who really had to keep the team together. He had to wear a psychologist hat, as well as a manager, as well as a friend, as well as a babysitter, as well as all of this. And then at the end of the year, he's got to go through the whole same thing again with his team. I thought he did a remarkable job after talking to him and reading so many stories about what happened. That 93 incident, the boating incident, by the way, was national news. That really was a big deal. When's the last time 2 players on the same pitching staff, same team, died just weeks before a season begins?
Yeah.
Well, you referenced, you wrote about the Chapman incident. You wrote about a lot of incidents in that book. I had read The Pitch That Killed and some of the other backup books that you had mentioned in there. But I love when I find anything in a book that's going to win me a drink in a bar. And I'll tell you, you gave me 2 of them, all right? Not one, Coach, in this book. There's 2 of them. And I guarantee you, wherever you go, you're going to win these, right? The first one, of all the cycles hit in baseball, only one person has done a reverse cycle, home run, triple, double, single, with a grand slam in there. And that was Twitchell. So
he had that's right. Yeah, Mr. Twitchell for Cleveland, well over 100 years ago, had a phenomenal game. It was just through the roof. I forgot his numbers now, but it was just incredible. That's right. Yeah.
Well, I feel confident that I will bet around on everybody in the bar on no one getting that one. So here's the other one I found amazing. Coach, Mark dug this fact up. 13 99-yard plays in the NFL.
Wow.
Only one was a Hall of Fame quarterback to a Hall of Fame receiver that caught the ball. Only one of those 13. And you got to try to name it. I would never have gotten this. Otto Graham.
To who?
Max Speedy, right?
Max Speedy.
Yep. So I guarantee you that'll win you one, right? Because I would have thought it's got to be Bradshaw to Swan or one of those, Or I would have thought Manning, right, to Harrison. Would have never guessed.
So many combinations you could come up with for that. That's true.
So what's next writing for you, Mark?
So it's funny, within about a week, I'm going to finish up the last chapter on volume 2 of Hidden History of Cleveland Sports. So I've had a lot of fun with it. I've learned a bunch of things, having a blast. I had no idea, among other things, that there were the 1960s, an entire decade had double headers in the NFL, and the whole thing was started by Art Modell. I had no idea. Cleveland was very intrinsic to that, and the early ones had some amazing stories about that. So I got a kick out of that. That was interesting. Bunch of other stories. Had a lot of fun digging up just so much of the sports history. So it's probably a year away from publication. I got to work on the art, the photographs with it, but almost done researching and writing.
That's amazing. And your book, The Hidden History of Cleveland Sports, is, I assume, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere good books are sold, right?
Absolutely. Or people can always email me at mbona30, that's mbona30 at neo.rr.com.
Coach, any last questions for Mark before he rushes off to finish another featured article or a great book?
Yeah, you can get it on Amazon in Germany here. I looked it up. So
Great.
32 euros hard copy, 27 paperback. So it is available on Amazon in Germany. But I wondered, did you have any nuggets from the World Series with Cubs? I mean, that broke my heart. I was saying when we lost to the Cubs, like, is there any nuggets behind the scene that we all need to know that we don't know?
Nothing earth-shattering, but I remember I was there for all the postseason game, the home postseason games. And we had a series of stories. I was doing a lot of behind the scenes type stories at the ballpark over the last 7, 8, 9 years. And I was there for a lot of big moments, a lot of exciting moments. But I have to say, I think only once or twice, I physically could feel the press box, an area, I should say, of the stadium physically shaking as if it were an earthquake. And it was the Rajai Davis home run in Game 7, so close, late in the game. And we were out in the kid zone, out in right field, along the baseline, because there were so many media there in the main press box. I was out there when he hit that, and I'm not talking about reporters cheering. I'm talking about the stadium went ballistic to where I physically felt myself swaying. Been to, I don't know how many games there, never felt that before. I thought that was amazing. Then seeing the dejection on the street afterward was just unbelievable. It broke a lot of hearts.
I haven't recovered. My brother lives in Westlake and my mom's in Westlake. So I have my mom. I just spoke to her right before the podcast up in Westlake, and she lives with my brother up there.
Nice.
Awesome. Mark, I appreciate your time. Again, The Hidden History of Cleveland Sports. Whether you're a Cleveland fan or not, there's plenty to digest in here, and there's plenty of stuff you're going to learn about that you'll be amazed about. And please, if you see me in a bar, don't try to pull one of these two out, right? So I'll end up buying a lot of drinks. Mark, have a great day. Thanks for joining us.
You too, guys. Thanks so much.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye. Amazing, huh, Coach? We could write a ton of articles ourselves about all the ups and downs and the hidden history that we've endured as Cleveland fans. But Coach, big win last week. Kicked off the season. You played it in a little town, right?
Yeah, we played in the little town of Paris, and that was exciting. So our first game, or my first game in this European Football League, was on the road in Paris. Played in a nice big stadium, and we went up against a well-coached team. Jack Del Rio, former lead of the NFL as a player and as a coach. Most recently, the defensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders, 21, 22, and 23 seasons. He's the head coach and the defensive coordinator and his son is the offensive coordinator. We were able to go on the road and beat them 17-15 to get our started.
Awesome. Before we circle back to that game, you mentioned Jack Del Rio as a coach. What other NFL names are out in the European League that people would know?
Well, our head coach is Jim Tomsula, and Jim was the head coach of the 49ers after Harbaugh was go. He took over interim for the rest of the season, and then the following year, and then the Kaepernick issue arose, and he was let go because he benched Kaepernick taking a knee. So, there's John Shoup is former NFL coordinator from the Chicago Bears. He's the head coach of the team in Copenhagen. You've got Jim Herman. He's a head coach, former Michigan assistant. Dave Warner, not related to me, but Dave was in the University of Kansas. He's a head coach over here. He's got some NFL experience. There's quite a few guys that have NFL experience over here. Craig Kulikowski coached in both college and the NFL, Missouri for a long time, Alabama, University of Miami, and he's a head coach. So it's a great league, a lot of quality coaches. There's 16 teams in the league. So
well, 17-15, hard-fought victory, huh?
Yeah, 17-15. It was very hard-fought victory. I mean, Coach Del Rio is a great defensive coordinator, and he gave us everything you could possibly imagine. We were just on scraping, trying to find a way.
Now, you called the plays for the Rhine Fire as well, right?
Yes, I'm the offensive coordinator and the quarterback. And I dabble a lot with the offensive line. I coach a little bit of everything, but I coach the quarterbacks as my primary position and do the game planning and all that. So
what was Del Rio trying to dial up against you?
Well, I mean, I watched the film again today. In the opening series, we scored on some plays, and I think there were 7 different looks he gave me in those 7 plays. So he was man, he was playing zone, he was playing bear deep, bear front, he was 4 down, he was blitzing. He brought he came after. He tried to. He's a big football coach, so it was a cat and mouse game.
Well, congratulations on getting the best of them. Now, how long is the season for you there?
It's this past weekend, and it'll go through mid-August and then the playoffs will start. So it's a 12-game season and 2 bye weeks. So it's 14 weeks total. That's how it works. And
scheduling, right off the bat, you had a scheduling anomaly, right? You had the opener, and then what?
Now we're on bye week.
What do you think of that from a coaching standpoint?
The optimal time improvement in your football team is between weeks 1 and weeks 3, because once they play a couple games and they see the things that you've been practice they need to work on, it finally hits home, and then they work on it because they know they've got to get those things fixed. And that's usually when you have the most growth. And we have a very young team. I think we started 5 rookies, so that was unusual, and they really needed to practice and develop here and continue to play. But in the bye week here, limited practice, limited. So
how hard is it when you're getting geared up for the opener, right? The fans in Dusseldorf, you've compared them to the Raider Nation, right?
Yeah,
everyone's amped up. You get the big road win against Del Rio. You come back. What are you doing? What are you doing to keep that enthusiasm up and the excitement?
There was a big fire night tonight down in the Old Town, they call it, right on the Rhine River. There's a bar down there that really caters to the Rhine Fire fans and crowd, and they had a big they call them the fire talks. So they had a couple there, and then big fan base down there tonight. I skipped it so I could do the podcast and stay out of trouble. They have fun down there. Like you said, they're as close to Raider Nation as you can get. So they dress up and they tailgate and enjoy professional football over here.
Did they travel to Paris as well?
Oh yeah, we had a lot of fans. Yeah, I was looking right out the press box right in front of me. There was a large contingent of our fans there, and Paris 5 hours from Dusseldorf by car. So fans, I'm sure we'll have 50,000 at our home opener here coming up in another week. We'll play Vienna. The Vienna Vikings, which is the team that played for the championship last year. They didn't win the championship last year, but they played for it.
Yeah, some team named the Rhine Fire beat them, I think, right?
Yeah, so they're going to be hungry for revenge. I'm sure they're getting ready. They won their opener too. They look pretty good in their opener. So we'll, big challenge, but we're playing them at home, which is to our advantage. And travel is difficult. Over here, these are mostly bus trips more so than airplane trips.
When you're
So,
trying to integrate 5 new players into your offense, what do you look for? What are you expecting out of them from week to week? Are you limiting the playbook at the start, or were you hitting the ground running because you had a good camp? Well, you just don't know. I mean, my experience with really good players is still in their first professional game, their first college game. They tend to do some bizarre things. They tend to do some things that, you can just tell it's nerves and just settling in. But I thought for the most part, our rookies settled in and played pretty solid. They had a mistake here or there. They'll grow a lot. A long preseason as they do in professional football. It's 6 weeks. We had 5 mini camps. So it's an interesting schedule. But I thought our team was ready and showed up and played hard. And, like anything, execution improves the more you do it. So our execution will continue to improve as we work through the season and get more experience with a lot of those young guys. Did they get a lot of confidence after that going the 7-play opening touchdown drive? I think so. I think that we were excited about going down and scoring and, taking the lead because we held the lead the entire game. We never lost the lead, never had to come from behind. Comforting. We have a really good defense, pretty veteran defense. I think most every start back except, but we picked up a couple good defensive ends. So our defense is probably as good as any in the conference or in the league over here. And so I felt we played conservatively on offense at times because of how well we're playing. But we didn't want to turn the ball over, which we had no turnovers. So I was pleased about no turnovers. We had 1 pre-snap penalty, no delay again, no foo bars like that where you make mistakes and it just, what is that? It's a, first game jitters. We didn't that, and that was good. We played good winning football, and like I said, we had 1 penalty, I believe, and so. Are you run first, pass first? What's your dream scenario as offensive coordinator? Well, this team had been built on offensive line play and being physical and running the football. But I mean, the starting tailback here for the last 2 years that rushed for a lot of yards was bought in free agency and taken to Copenhagen along with the starting quarterback. He went to Copenhagen. 3 of the starting offensive not bought, but I mean, free agency, they got paid more to sign other places, and the tight end retired. And so we lost a lot of good players through the attrition of being good. When you're good, people want to sign your players, and, free agent market, it is what it is. That's their prerogative to go. And so, we're replacing those guys, and we have good talent here. We have talent. So I'm pleased with that. It's just, they haven't played together until the Paris game. They haven't played with Warinner as the offensive coordinator. I haven't called plays in this league, in this system, because I'm running the Rhine Fire system. It's not Ed Warner's system. This is the Rhine Fire system. And it's been successful for him. So I'm adapting to, pro football in Europe, and then, building an offense around the talents of the new players. So it's been fun. It's been exciting and challenging, but
I like where we're headed.
And so for anyone who might be traveling to Europe, the Dusseldorf Rhine game should be on the checklist if they're in the area.
Absolutely. Yeah, most of the time we play on Sundays. Sunday after because of the prime time for the TV and so forth. We're in a soccer stadium, obviously. So I think Sundays is the day they don't play soccer and they play on Saturdays. But yeah, if you can game in the Rhine Fire, you would love it. It would be exciting, great. I mean, the fans get there 2 hours early. Tailgating. I mean, the Germans like their beer now. They like to tailgate. So there's at least 10, 15,000 of them out there in a fenced-in area, pre-stadium warm up, tailgate, drinking a lot of beer, a lot of fun, dressed up, excited. And,
what's the beer of choice for the Rhine Fire, or at least Coach Warinner?
Well, Pilsner beers are big in Germany, and every community has their own Pilsner. And they're very loyal and locally oriented, very loyal to them. So we have a sponsor, Koninger, which stands for the King's Pilsner, and they sponsor us. But there's so many good beers over here, so many good beers. And then this is the king, this Germany, Dusseldorf area of alternate beers, which is a dark beer. So they have these dark beers that aren't heavy, but they're dark. Alt beers, alternative beers, I believe stands for. But there's, I think, 16 breweries, alt beer breweries, and there's only 18 in the whole world. So 16 of them are within an hour of Dusseldorf. So that's a big thing here is the alt beers. But Pilsner's number one.
Awesome.
You know,
who's next on the schedule?
So the Vienna.
That's right.
And the last time we played them was in the championship last year, and they beat them in the championship. So I think they'll be ready. They just won their opener. They play this week, so we have an advantage there. We can see 2 weeks of film on them. I've been preparing all week for them, so I've been working on the game plan for the last couple days. I'll continue to do that. They play Sunday, then we'll see what we need to adapt. But yeah, so they come to town, and we'll play not this coming Sunday, but next Sunday.
Awesome, Coach. We're looking forward to a successful Rhine Fire season. I know I made a promise to you. I'm going to get over there for a game, and I'm going to. Can't wait to see it. Can't wait to experience what it's like for the European version of the Raider Nation.
Oh, you'll love it. And you're always anybody else that's in the area. We're here to Europe this summer. We play through August. If the finals are the Super Bowl would be September. So we're hoping to build a team that strong to run through the playoffs and get to the Super Bowl again. But we'll take it 1 week at a time and see how that goes. But yeah, if you're over this way, hit me up, and you know me. We'll try to connect you with tickets, and you'll enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it. Although I wish I could drink the beer, but I'll have to find something else to drink and another adult beverage. Coach, as always, we missed you. Glad to have you back. Stick around after we sign off here. And thanks, everybody, for tuning in. The Rhine Fire, next game against Vienna. We'll see you next Wednesday. Thanks.
Good night, everybody.